Have you ever felt the quiet pull of a life you cannot quite name? A sense that something inside you keeps whispering toward a version of yourself you have never met. And yet, every morning, you wake up in the same skin, the same routines, the same quiet ache of almost. You are not imagining it. That whisper is real. It has been with you longer than you remember. And tonight, I want to tell you something that Carl Jung understood at the deepest level of his work. Something that most people who quote him have never actually grasped. There is a difference between hearing the signal and answering it. Most of your life, you have been hearing it. The signal arrives as restlessness in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, as the strange sadness that follows you home from a celebration, as the dream you cannot quite shake, as the moment you catch your own reflection and feel for one suspended breath that you are looking at a stranger. These are not random moods, they are not weakness, they are the soul, signaling. But hearing is not answering, and this is where almost every seeker becomes stuck. They learn to hear the signal, they study, they read, they listen to voices like this one. They feel the goosebumps, they feel the rightness, and then they go on living the same life they were living before, wondering why nothing ever truly changes. Tonight we are going to walk into the difference, the exact, narrow doorway between the people who hear and the people who answer. Because the life you keep almost reaching for, the one whispering at the edge of every quiet moment, is not waiting on the universe. It is waiting on one specific shift inside you, and by the end of this video, you will know what it is. Before we go deeper, take a moment, wherever you are, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from tonight. The soul is always speaking. The question is, who is listening with you? Let me tell you what I think you have been feeling. You have been doing the work. You have read the books. You have written the journal entries. You have sat in the silence and listened for the answers. You have changed your habits, your thoughts, your morning routine. You have tried to think positively, to be grateful, to hold the higher version of yourself in your mind. And some part of it has worked. You feel things more deeply now. You see patterns you never used to see. You recognize when something is off. You have moments, real moments, of clarity and peace. But then the moments pass, and you find yourself back at the kitchen counter at 11 at night, staring at nothing, asking yourself the question you do not say out loud. Why does my life still look like this? Why am I still here? If I have grown so much, why does my outer world look almost exactly the same as it did a year ago? This is one of the most painful places a person can sit in, because it is not the pain of not trying, it is the pain of trying and still being met with silence. And here is what almost no one tells you. That silence is not a verdict on your worth. It is not a sign that the universe has overlooked you. It is not punishment. It is a message, a very specific one. Your soul is telling you that something in the way you have been seeking is incomplete, that you have learned to hear the signal, but you have not yet learned to answer it, that the conversation between your conscious mind and your deeper self has been one-sided. And until that conversation becomes whole, your outer world cannot reorganize itself around a self that has not yet fully arrived. Jung saw this in his patients again and again, men and women who had done years of inner work and still felt stuck. He understood that insight alone does not transform a life. Understanding alone does not transform a life. Even feeling does not transform a life. Something deeper has to occur, something that begins not in the mind, not even in the emotions, but in the body, in the bones, in the part of you that knows things without needing to think them. That is what we are walking toward. Here is the reframe that will change everything if you let it land. You have been taught that the goal is to feel good, to stay positive, to raise your mood, your outlook, your daily emotional state. And these things have their place, but they are not the doorway. They are the welcome mat outside the doorway. And most people spend their entire lives standing politely on the welcome mat, waiting for the door to open on its own. The doorway is something else entirely. The doorway is what Jung called the integration of the self. And it does not feel like a high, it feels like a knowing. Let me explain the difference, because this is the heart of everything. A high is something that comes and goes. You feel it when you hear a song that moves you. You feel it when you finish a video like this one. You feel it for an hour, maybe a day, and then ordinary life closes back around you and the feeling slips away. A high lives in your emotions. And emotions, by their very nature, are weather. They move. They shift. They cannot be the foundation of anything permanent. A knowing is different. A knowing is what you feel right now about the fact that you are breathing. You do not have to convince yourself. You do not have to affirm it. You do not have to visualize it. Your body simply knows it because it is happening. The knowing lives in the body, in the unconscious, in the deepest layer of who you are. And the unconscious does not deal in maybe. It deals in is. This is the difference between hearing the signal and answering it. Hearing is emotion. Answering is embodiment. Hearing is the mind agreeing. Answering is the entire organism reorganizing itself around a new truth, so completely that the old self can no longer fit inside it. And here is what Jung understood that almost no one teaches. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is one of his most quoted lines. But almost no one finishes the thought, because the next implication is the one that matters. When the unconscious does become conscious, when the deeper self is finally invited into the room, fate stops happening to you, and it starts happening through you. Write in the comments, the signal is clear. Let that sentence move through you for a breath before you keep listening. But before any of this can happen, there is a passage, and there is no way around it. You cannot answer the signal while you are still hiding from yourself. Every person carries a shadow. Jung used that word with great precision. The shadow is not your dark side in any dramatic sense. It is simply everything about yourself that you have refused to look at. The grief you have not let yourself feel. The anger you decided was not allowed. The desire that did not match the life you were told to want. The version of you that you packed away in childhood because someone made you believe it was too much, or not enough, or wrong. The shadow does not disappear when you ignore it. It lives in you. It speaks through your reactions, your patterns, the relationships you keep recreating, the doors that keep closing in the same way. Jung said it plainly. That which you do not bring to consciousness will come to you as fate. This is the part of the work that most seekers skip. Because shadow work does not feel good. It does not feel like a high. It feels like sitting in a room with parts of yourself you have spent decades avoiding. It feels like grief. It feels like rage you did not know you were carrying. It feels like crying for reasons you cannot fully name. And yet, this is the doorway. Because the shadow is not the obstacle to your new life. The shadow is the energy you have been spending to keep your old life intact. Every part of yourself that you have buried is taking energy to keep buried. And until you release that energy, you do not actually have enough of yourself available to build anything new. This is why the people who try to manifest from a high vibration alone keep failing. Their conscious mind is reaching toward a new reality, but their unconscious is still holding 1,000 contradictions in place. The mind says abundance. The shadow says, I do not deserve it. The mind says love. The shadow says love is dangerous. The mind says freedom. The shadow says freedom means I will be alone. The signal cannot answer itself across that divide. Something has to bridge it. And the only thing that bridges it is your willingness to sit with the parts of yourself you have been running from. Not to fix them, not to perform them away. Just to see them, to say, you are part of me. I am not afraid of you anymore. The moment you can do that, even imperfectly, the energy begins to move. The contradiction begins to dissolve. And for the first time, your whole self is pointing in the same direction. And this is where the releasing begins. Once you have looked at your shadow, you start to see what you have been carrying that was never yours. The voice in your head that says, you are not enough. Listen to it carefully sometime. That is not your voice. That is the voice of someone who said it to you when you were small enough to believe it. You have been carrying their fear for 30 years and calling it yours. The version of success you have been chasing. Sit with it sometime. Whose dream is that? Whose approval are you trying to win? Whose life are you trying to recreate? Or whose disappointment are you trying to outrun? You have been spending your one life answering a question that someone else asked. The relationships that drain you, the obligations that no longer fit, the identities you assembled at 22 and never updated, the apologies you keep making for taking up space, the smallness you keep performing because you learned that smallness was safe. Letting go does not mean burning your life down. It means stopping the slow leak of your own energy into things that were never the soul's signal in the first place. It means choosing, gently and deliberately, to stop carrying what was never yours to carry. This is a doorway, not an ending. And every doorway requires you to set something down before you can step through. Now, I want you to do something with me. Your body already knows what I'm about to describe, even if your conscious mind has never named it. Think for a moment about the feeling of a Sunday afternoon. Not the idea of it, the feeling. The slower air, the quality of light through the window. The particular kind of stillness that only exists on a Sunday. Your body knows that frequency. You do not have to remember it. You simply recognize it the moment it begins. Think about the feeling of the first cool evening at the end of summer. The first night you reach for a blanket instead of pushing it away. Your body knows that too. The body remembers atmospheres. It remembers the texture of moments. It carries an entire library of how specific realities feel from the inside. Here is what almost no one understands. Your body can learn to recognize the feeling of the version of you who has already answered the signal. The you who is no longer waiting. The you who has already become the person on the other side of the doorway. That feeling exists inside you right now. Not as imagination, as a frequency your body is capable of holding, the same way it holds the frequency of Sunday afternoon. This is what Jung circled in his late work. The self, the integrated wholeness, is not something you achieve in the future. It is something you discover was already present underneath all the noise. The work is not invention, the work is remembering. So tonight, before you sleep, I want you to try something. Close your eyes and ask your body, not your mind, what does it feel like to be the version of me who is no longer afraid? Do not answer with words. Wait for the body to answer. There will be a softening somewhere, a shift in the breath, a small movement of warmth or stillness. That is the signal answering. And the more often you sit in that feeling, the more your nervous system begins to recognize it as home. And what the nervous system recognizes as home, the outer life begins, slowly and then suddenly, to reorganize around. Write in the comments, I am listening. Mean it when you write it. There is something I want to tell you that goes beneath even this. You have been told in 1,000 different ways that you must become someone else to live the life you want. A better version, a higher version, an evolved version. And there is a partial truth in that. But the deeper truth is this. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to someone you already are underneath everything you were told to be. The signal you keep hearing is not the voice of a future self calling you forward. It is the voice of your original self calling you home. The self that existed before the conditioning, before the apologies, before the smallness, before you learned which parts of you were acceptable to bring into the room. That self has been waiting, patient, unhurried, knowing that eventually you would grow tired enough of the performance to finally turn around and listen. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not the construction of a perfect new identity. The slow, quiet work of becoming who you already were. The shedding of every mask that no longer fits. The reintegration of every piece of yourself that you exiled in order to survive. And here is the part that no one tells you. The moment you begin that return, the outer world begins to feel it. People shift around you. Old patterns become harder to maintain. New people arrive. Doors that were closed find a way to crack open. Not because the universe is rewarding you, because you have finally stopped sending two different signals into the field. For the first time, your whole self is sending one signal, and one signal is louder than 1,000 fragmented ones. This is the answering, not the affirming, not the visualizing, the answering. The full-bodied yes that comes from a self no longer at war with itself. I want you to imagine something now. A year from tonight, you wake up in a life that does not yet exist. Not a dramatically different life, just one where the ache of almost is gone, where the things you used to keep secret, even from yourself, you now move through openly. where the version of you who used to wait for permission is simply no longer in the room, where you have stopped negotiating with parts of your life that were never going to negotiate back, where the signal is no longer something you hear in the quiet, it is something you live inside, that life is not far away. It is one decision deep, and the decision is not what you think it is. The decision is not to try harder, not to manifest more diligently, not to think more positively. The decision is to stop abandoning yourself, to stop trading the truth of who you are for the safety of who you were told to be, to turn finally toward the signal that has been calling you the entire time, and to answer it with the only thing that has ever actually worked, the whole of yourself, no longer split, no longer hiding, no longer waiting for proof before you are willing to begin. The universe is not on the other side of a wall, watching to see if you are worthy. The universe is on the other side of your own unanswered signal, waiting for you to come home to yourself. Because the moment you do, everything else becomes a conversation, not a battle. I want you to imagine something now. A year from tonight, you wake up in a life that does not yet exist. Not a dramatically different life, just one where the ache of almost is gone, where the things you used to keep secret, even from yourself, you now move through openly, where the version of you who used to wait for permission is simply no longer in the room, where you have stopped negotiating with parts of your life that were never going to negotiate back, where the signal is no longer something you hear in the quiet, it is something you live inside, that life is not far away. It is one decision deep, and the decision is not what you think it is. The decision is not to try harder, not to manifest more diligently, not to think more positively. The decision is to stop abandoning yourself, to stop trading the truth of who you are for the safety of who you were told to be, to turn finally toward the signal that has been calling you the entire time, and to answer it with the only thing that has ever actually worked, the whole of yourself, no longer split, no longer hiding, no longer waiting for proof before you are willing to begin. The universe is not on the other side of a wall, watching to see if you are worthy. The universe is on the other side of your own unanswered signal, waiting for you to come home to yourself. Because the moment you do, everything else becomes a conversation, not a battle.